The useEffect hook. It is the hook that enables you to perform side effects inside the component. What are side effects then? Side effects can be described as reactions to the changes that happen inside the component. Unlike real-world side effects that occur automatically, side effects in React must be implemented by the developer. The useEffect hook is the way of implementing such effects in React. To get a simple understanding about useEffects behavior, let's look at a simple component. It has a count variable declared using the useState hook and a button to increment the count each time it is clicked. Now I want to log the count value in the console each time it is changed. The count being incremented is the component's change, and logging the value is the side effect to it. For now, just focused on the behavior of the hook. We will discuss about the syntax in detail next. useEffect, a set of parentheses, the callback function, and the dependency. Inside the callback function, let's log the value. console.log count. Let's check this by clicking the button now. As you can see, the values are being logged in the console. Let's now focus on the syntax of the useEffect hook. First, we have the import statement, which enables you to use the useEffect hook inside the component. Then the useEffect declaration. This declares a useEffect hook inside the component and expects two parameters. The first is the callback function and the second are the dependencies. For the third step, we have the callback function, also known as the setup function. This is the function with the logic that needs to be executed as the side effect. Next, we have optional dependencies. They compare themselves with the previous value, and if any change detected, they execute the callback function. Finally, an optional cleanup function. This function stops or undo the callback function. This runs with the previous value of a dependency when it is changed. Also, when the component is removed from the DOM. For our next example, let's look at an advanced scenario. First, we have a component with a selection for the type and a useState variable to hold the selected type. The onChange event of the select is set to the setter method of the type. Next, we have a service named animalService to represent the external environment. It accepts the type as the parameter and returns the array of breeds related to the type. For our task, we need to load the related array of breeds from the animalService based on the selection in the component. According to the useEffects perspective, selecting the type variable is the change in the component and loading the array of breeds is the reaction. This is the current view of our component right now. It has a text said selected none and a drop down to select the type. To start implementing the solution, first let's import the useEffect. Next, let's declare the useEffect hook. useEffect, set of parentheses, the callback function, and the dependency. In this case, the dependency is the type variable. Inside our callback function, let's make use of the animalService. I will create a variable to hold the animalService. const service equals animalService. Notice the import statement at the top, and let's pass in the selected type. Now this service variable has the method getAnimals. In order to hold the returned value, let's make use of a new useState hook variable. Let's call it breeds const breeds, set breeds equals useState. The initial value will be an empty array. We will make use of the setBreeds setter method To set the return value, set reads, set of parentheses. Now to visualize the change, I will update the JSX portion. I will add a new h4 tag and type reads a JSX expression, and inside that reads to string. Now let's check the view. Initially the breeds are empty, but when we select an option, the useEffect hook loads the values accordingly. According to the example we have seen now, the useEffect hook updates the component with an external service. This behavior suggests a better definition. That is, the useEffect hook synchronizes the component with an external system. If the useEffect hook is added after the return statement of the component, you will get the error similar to your right in the console and the browser accordingly. Just make sure you are adding the useEffect at the top of the component. The useEffect does not work inside conditions or loops. To get the useEffect to work inside loops, you can define a new component with the useEffect hook and use it inside the loops iteration. The top right section in the code displays a component named child with the useEffect hook. The bottom right section displays using the same component inside a loop. The useEffect hook does not return a value. If we assign it to a variable, the variable will be undefined. The useEffect hook does not directly cause a component to re-render. However, if we have a state changing code inside our callback function, then the component will be re-rendered. Not having a dependency array in the useEffect hook will cause the effect to run each and every time the component re-renders. To illustrate this, I have added a useEffect hook without the dependency array and two useState variables which are being incremented by two buttons, causing the component to re-render. As I click the buttons, please check the console to your bottom right. As you can see, the effect runs every time the component re-renders, since it does not have dependencies defined. Having an empty dependency array will cause the effect only to run at the beginning. I will update the existing useEffect hook with an empty dependency array. Now, when I refresh the page, you can see the effect is being executed. But if we increment the numbers, the effect does not run. Having a dependency in your dependencies array will cause the effect to run every time the dependency changes. For example, I will add the first variable as one of our dependencies. Now, every time the first number is being incremented, the effect is being executed, but not in the second variable. Since the useEffect has array of dependencies, we can provide multiple values at the same time. In this example, instead of providing the first variable, I will add two more variables to it. When I increment each value, you can see the effect is being executed each and every time. No matter how you set up your dependencies, the useEffect will be executed once during the initial render. To illustrate this, I will refresh the page. You can see in the console the effect has been executed once. But if you see two effects being executed at the same time during the initial render, that is happening because the strict mode has been activated on your project. And the strict mode also check your effect additionally one time. useState variables can be used as a dependency for the useState hook. The code snippet illustrates how to use a useState variable as a dependency. Since we have used many examples with the useState variables throughout this course, let's move to the next type. As for our next type, let's see how to use props as a dependency. In this example, we are trying to multiply the selected value by 2. First, we have the parent component with the select and the useState variable to hold the selected option. The selected option will be passed down to a child component. Inside the child component, we are accepting the number as a prop and a useState hook variable to store the final value. To implement the solution, first let's declare a useEffect hook. useEffect, the callback function, and as for our dependency, let's use the prop number. Each time the number is changed, let's multiply it by 2 and assign it to the useState variable using the setter method. Set value number times 2. Now when we select a value, you can see the values are being updated. This is because the useEffect hook inside the child component detects the change in the number prop. For our next type, let's see how to use a function as a dependency in our useEffect hook. To have a better understanding, let's look at a simple scenario. In this scenario, we are going to collect the total amount for the customer's bill in a restaurant. We have two inputs. First is the amount and the second is to whether add the tax or not. Two collected variables will be stored inside useState hook variables. We are making use of a separate component to calculate the total, and the collected inputs will be passed down as props. In the other component, we have a simple function to calculate the total. It is going to make use of the hash text prop at the time of the calculation. I went ahead and declared a useEffect hook variable with the dependency food amount prop. Inside our callback function, now let's call the calcTotal function. When we save, we can see a warning in the terminal. It says React hook useEffect has a missing dependency calcTotal, which is the name of our function. This is happening because we are using a prop inside our function and it is a reactive value, meaning the function will change based on its value, and the useEffect hook should use the latest version of this function. As a simple solution, we can move the calcTotal function inside our useEffect hook. When we save, now there's a new warning telling that the React hook has a missing dependency hash text, which is the name of our prop. Since it is a reactive value, we can add it as a dependency for our useEffect hook. When we save, now the warnings are gone. But what if we do not want to declare the function inside the useEffect hook? In such cases, we can wrap the function with a useCallback hook. useCallback. And for its dependency, we can set the prop value hash text. Now we can remove this dependency hash text from the useEffect hook and we can provide the calcTotal function. Since the dependencies of a useCallback hook always return the latest function, we do not need to worry about using it in the useEffect hook. And that is how you use a function as a dependency in a useEffect hook. And if you take a look at, the components are working as expected. In this section, let's see if we can use a local variable as a dependency for the useEffect hook. In my component, I have created a local variable named count and a function to increment the value and a useEffect hook with the dependency count. You can see from the console, each time I click the button, only the function executes, but not the useEffect hook. This is because, unlike useState variables and props, the local variables are not powerful enough to cause a re-render. Also, all the local variables will be reset to their default value during the re-render, indicating that there was no change since the previous render. The effect is executed after the rendering process. To illustrate this, I have set up a simple component. In this component, I have added a console log section inside JSX expression and another console log inside the useEffect hook. A button is set to increment a useState hook variable which will re-render the component. When I increment the button, you can see in the console, first the rendering log is displayed, followed by the effect log. This means the effect is executed after the component has been rendered. In this section, let's look at the reactive dependencies. To have a better understanding, I have created a simple component in which the user can enter the amount and the wet percentage to get the total amount. We are using three useState variables. First is the amount, second is the wet percentage which has the default value of 5, followed by the total. To calculate the value each time the amount is changed, we are using a useEffect hook. In the terminal of the code editor, you can see a warning is displayed saying React hook useEffect has a missing dependency wet. This is because we are using the wet useState variable to calculate the total amount, and it is not a dependency for the useEffect hook. Since the wet percentage can be changed, we have to specify it as a reactive dependency. I will add wet here. And then the error is gone. If we have a constant as a dependency in our useEffect hook, it would not make any sense since the constants are not changing. As an example, I will replace the wet useState variable with a constant. Now we can safely remove this dependency from our useEffect hook. If we think a little bit more, all the variables inside this component would get recreated every time the component is re-rendered. Since the constant does not change, we can safely move it out of the component, and the output would not change. In this section, let's see how to use a updater function inside our useEffect hook. To illustrate this, I have prepared a simple component. In this component, we are collecting how many times these buttons are clicked. To represent each button, I have prepared three useState variables and another useState variable to collect the count. We have a useEffect hook with the dependencies related to the buttons. Each time a button is clicked, the count is incremented. But when you look at the terminal window of the code editor, you can see a warning. React hook useEffect has a missing dependency count. This is because, just like previous examples, the count variable is a reactive value and it should be inside the dependencies array. But in this scenario, adding it inside the dependencies array would not make any sense. As a solution, we can make use of an updater function. It is providing the existing value to be used. And now the error is gone. If we check our component, you can see it is working fine. We can use multiple useEffect hooks inside a single component. In this example, we are using two useEffect hooks and they have their own useState dependencies. Each time a related useState variable is incremented, the related useEffect hook is executed. However, if you find repeating the same code inside every useEffect hook, it is better to define a custom hook to handle all the effects inside a single hook. A cleanup function inside the useEffect hook helps you to stop or undo the callback function. The cleanup function is executed when we are unmounting the component from our DOM. To illustrate this, I have set up a simple scenario where we have two components, home and about. Each of these components have their own useEffect hook with a cleanup function. To illustrate each of these components leaving the DOM, I have added a link using the React Router DOM If we go ahead and refresh the page, you can see the initial message home loaded is being displayed, which is coming from the useEffect hook. Clicking this link will unmount the home component and load the about component. You can see in the console, leaving home message is displayed, which is coming from the cleanup function of the home component. Similarly, we have a cleanup function inside the about component also. When we click the home link, you can see the message leaving about is displayed, which is also coming from the cleanup function inside the about component. A cleanup function executes with the previous value of the dependency when that particular dependency changes. In this example, you can see the cleanup function is logging the previous value. When we click the button increment, you can see in the console the previous value is being displayed using the cleanup function. These are some of the similar use cases for the cleanup function. You can use the cleanup function to clear timeouts and clear intervals, clear event listeners, and clean fetch requests. When using the useEffect hook, you might come across this error, which indicates maximum update depth exceeded. When we update a useState variable in the dependency array, it causes the effect to run. But during the effect execution, the same useState variable is updated again, which is detected by the same useEffect hook after the ongoing effect is finished. This causes the effect to run again and again, resulting in infinite loop. That marks the end of this tutorial. Like the video if you have learned something new and enjoyed it. To help the channel grow and to learn more videos like this, please subscribe. Stay safe until we meet on the next one.